And a very good morning to you. You're very welcome along to another week of Off the Ball AM. We're with you every morning, Monday to Friday from 7:45. OTB AM is live. You can get us on Twitter at Off the Ball AM, or you can also get us on Facebook, on Periscope, and wherever it is that you're consuming this. Remember, if you want to just listen to us, you can head over to offtheball.com and hit play on the big button in the top right-hand corner. And then we're just a radio show. Oh, and how's your weekend?
Not too bad. Feeling pretty good. Managed to make it through the first weekend of NFL without coming into work on Monday morning feeling sleep deprived, which I think is probably my biggest success of the year.
It's hard to know what time is a reasonable time to stop watching. You're like, just going to check the scores, just going to see what's going on.
Yeah, when is the appropriate time to remove the intravenous drip of red zone into your veins? It never feels like an appropriate time because it's just pure addiction, really.
2 o'clock?
Well, that's good for you if you managed to make it all the way to 2 o'clock. It's 9:30 for me, sort of thing.
Yeah, I didn't. But it was a pretty interesting weekend of NFL. Mike Carlson's going to join us a little bit later on. Khalil Mack takes an interception from Aaron Rodgers, runs it to the house. Chicago are like, hey, 90 million quid, every single penny worth it. Aaron Rodgers goes down injured. The whole of the NFL goes, uh-oh, what's going to happen here? He climbs off his deathbed and has a third quarter comeback from 20 points to win the game by a single point. That's drama.
Yeah.
Opening day drama, that's drama.
He should have been picked in the final drive as well, which kind of added to the whole mystique around it. So it wasn't perfect, but he does these sort of things on a regular basis, just never when it really, really matters at the end of the season, one might say, or else he's just crocked and not able to play in those meaningful end of the season games.
So let's wait and see exactly what happens with that, because there is a possibility that he has the greatest year of all time, and that's the start of it. Get on board the Aaron Rodgers hype train is my advice to you if you're in any way interested in it. The other thing that happened over the weekend was that Denmark hammered Wales.
Yeah.
I mean hammered is a pretty routine victory.
Yes, they looked a superior side.
For a scratch team who was supposed to be full of futsal players who hadn't actually trained together or didn't really care, didn't want to be there, were in the middle of like a massive battle with the FA. Like, they played all right.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if this is a terrible result for Ireland or just a moderately bad result for Ireland. It's just every time you see superiority against teams that have hammered you, you're always a little bit worried, but then putting it into that context is always sort of dangerous business. Like, they managed to make Ethan Ampadu look like a 17-year-old footballer, lo and behold. Who would have thought that? So fair play to Uga Harida for that tactical masterclass that Ireland weren't able to pull off last Thursday night. So maybe Wales, after all, just an average team, and maybe they just had the game of their lives against Ireland, or maybe Ireland were just incredibly terrible against Wales and made them look very, very good.
I think everything is falling into place for us to be very depressed about Irish football, and rightly so. The back pages of the newspapers today have some more details on the Keane article stuff. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think that like a clear-cut hammering for the team that just hammered you is never a good look for international football, and a trip to darkest Poland for a scratch team from an Irish perspective, that also looks like things could go badly wrong very quickly.
Well, we're so lucky that it's a friendly tomorrow night. We're so lucky that we're not starting off with a double whammy of competitive fixtures, because it would be 2 defeats straight away. We wouldn't stand a prayer against Denmark, given how not amazing they looked last night, but how competent they look. Like, this Ireland team, particularly from what we saw on Thursday, isn't capable of living with a competent team, given plenty of the incompetencies that Ireland showed on the pitch and off the pitch, when it came to management, when it came to tactical nous, in terms of approaching how Wales set up that game. So we are blessed that we've got one competitive game in this window, and we've got another month to get our shit somewhat together before that. But spoiler alert, we're probably not going to have our shit together in time to actually take anything from those other two games. The thing is, they are at home.
The draw for the group stages is now one of the most important draws that we're ever going to have. Remember, these games, we will get to play a home tournament match in Dublin if we qualify. That's why it's the most important qualification that's ever happened, because the massive benefit of that, you're saying we're partnered with Spain, so if we qualify and Spain qualify, we'll get to go to Bilbao.
Yeah, or else they come to Dublin. I'm not quite sure. That was a story that came out like a year ago. I haven't brushed up on that since. But it's either or, yeah. We are, Dublin and Bilbao are twinned in that group. We
were talking a bit about this on Friday night, but like this has the Bang and the Staunton era off it at the moment. Like, this is as low as it has been. This is the...
Since Cyprus, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. Like, it's not getting... It is worse than Denmark, the performance we witnessed on Thursday. But it's all part of the one kind of phase,
on top of what happened against Denmark. Like, Denmark, you could kind of blah 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 away as a one-off knockout football. You push forward, they rip you apart. You take off your central midfield, they run through your central midfield and score loads of goals through where exactly you had the defensive shield that was working so well for you. Anyway, but the performance the other night was like abysmal, abject, and people are talking about the missing players, but some of those players are missing because they won't play for the current management team. That's kind of, you end up making a rod for your own back. Right, let's tell you what's coming up on the show today. As I said, Mike Carlson is going to be along with us on Monday mornings after 9 o'clock. We'll talk Serena Williams a little bit later on after her meltdown. She's been fined for her outburst. Quinny's going to join us to talk to us about the weekend's rugby. An interesting weekend from an Irish perspective, not as successful as the opening weekend, obviously, but some definite green shoots from some of the young players in Connacht. A hat-trick hero from the back row at the weekend. We'll talk about that as well. And the state of GAA, well, state of the nation. Really interesting club match in Derry. Footage emerged of Schlottneel keeping possession for one account I saw said 4 minutes. The videotape that is available has it at about 2 minutes. Carol Kane's going to come on to talk to us about exactly what happened, and Professor Niall Moynihan is also going to talk to us about what might be doable, what might be salvageable from the game, if indeed the game is as broken as Twitter would have you believe.
It's very, very broken. It's not just Twitter.
Let's bring in the newspapers.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
So the Camogie is the lead story. Cork winning with by a single point against Kilkenny. Their arch rivals in Croker yesterday. This is the lead on the Irish Times. Cork retained title after tight, nervy and dreary affair. O'Neill forced to reshuffle for Poland friendly. This is the fact that two players have gone home. John Walters, who obviously has his own history with Roy Keane, and Stephen Ward. Both of those have gone home injured. Queeveen Kelleher will not be playing. The young Liverpool goalkeeper who was part of the squad. He was just training with them. And Ronan Curtis, the Portsmouth striker, has been called up from the under-21s. He's suspended for the under-21s, so now might get a game for the seniors. That's how that's supposed to work, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he scored a late equaliser, didn't he, against Kosovo last week for the under-21s. So if you think there might be green shoots coming up at underage level after what happened during the summer and all that, late equalisers against Kosovo don't necessarily kind of whet the appetite for the future of Irish football either. Maybe we've got to wait till that under-17s team become men in a few years. He's
got 5 goals in 6 games for Portsmouth, though, so he is at least a striker in form. We don't have too many of those. And Justin Rose is on the verge of becoming the world number 1. Torrential rain ended up putting paid to the BMW Championships play yesterday. There is some hope that they'll play today. He's a shot clear of Rory McIlroy, but if they don't play today, then Justin Rose will become the world number 1. The Examiner taking aim. Aoife Murray frustrated by the negative views cycle in women's sport. We'll talk a bit more about that. Well, that's not today's. I was going to say, there you go. That's old news. So this one is definitely Monday, September the 10th, and it is the Cork Camogie players on the front cover there. All-Ireland Camogie Champions Cork celebrate their win over Kilkenny, but it all proved a bit too much for 5-month-old Tig Scannell, who's the son of team member Breach Corkery. He's bawling his eyes out in the cup, and Rebel Yell is the headline on the back page. Ref comes under fire as Cotter holds her nerve to make it back-to-back All-Irelands. Good piece in the Times Ireland edition today from Christy O'Connor about inconsistency in refereeing, which is definitely something that I was trying to think, because at the All-Ireland football final you can't see at the game what happens in the match if you're at the match because they don't show replays.
Yeah.
So actually it's a much better experience being at home watching it. And I was like, what is it because they fear that there might be trouble in the crowd? I mean, we know that that's something that obviously was cited as one of the issues when the Newbridge fiasco happened.
Yes, of course.
So I mean, that might be a real thing. But actually, it's probably just to point out how crappy the refereeing is.
No, it's to do with the fact that the ref can't be assisted by video technology. So you're not, just in case the referee takes a little glimpse up when the replay is being shown, and therefore maybe given evidence to conclude and arrive at the conclusion of a correct decision. That's why it's not allowed. But speaking about it, that Camogie final yesterday was just littered with poor decisions, which kind of comes from the rule book being crap. He was one of the, by all accounts, the referee who ref yesterday was one of the top 2 referees in the game, just not helped by the fact that it's essentially a non-contact sport, which is nonsense really. If it follows the sort of kind of semi-contact rules of hurling, at least the referee can do what the hurling referees do and just don't referee the game at all, just let it flow, and at least on that basis you can be a hell of a lot more consistent than the consistency or lack thereof we saw yesterday.
Yeah. Brian Kerr, speaking last night on Virgin Media Sport, has surgically destroyed the FAI and Martin O'Neill and the general lack of leadership at the top of the organisation. We've no leadership at the top. The people are the same for the last 20 years. Many of them are too old told, understand how to direct the operation right now. It's not just the FAI though. He says, Martin O'Neill says he's got nothing to do with the underage development. I would dispute that. It's his job to be part of the whole structure and create a mentality for the players. Wales aren't losing their young English-born players like Ethan Ampadu. Martin has a gang of fellas around him like Steve Guppy and Steve Walford. I don't know what they're all doing to have an impact. I mean, Guppy and Walford are the coaches. So Keane is kind of there as like a motivational speaker.
He's assistant to the manager. Whatever Martin O'Neill requires.
He seems to be having an impact on the wrong way. Do you want to very quickly just do that Roy Keane story? And we'll get a flag now and we'll come back to it a little bit later on.
Yeah, the Sun and the Daily Mail, Neil O'Riordan and Philip Quinn with this story this morning.
If you have any little ears in the car, you might want to put your hands over them for a second.
Yes, I'll read out the first sentence from Neil O'Riordan's piece on the front of the Sun. This is definitely the time when you cover up your ears. Harry Arter was called a prick and a wanker by Roy Keane during their June row. There's plenty more in the article, but that is very much the cliff note, and the exact details of this row has come out as to what exactly Martin O'Neill said. So Martin O'Neill can be expected to be grilled in Poland today, says Philip Quinn in his piece. The two of them, I'm sure it's something that a lot of the press corps have been aware of, but the Sun and the Irish Daily Mail have gone ahead and printed it this morning. So that's the extent of the vitriol we heard from Roy Keane towards Harry Arter. What was also said is that he's apologised in the past when he stepped out of line.
I have a vague recollection of that now. I couldn't remember the specific incident, but I remember there was one time at Malahide. Is that ringing any bells?
Not ringing any bells for me. It's not mentioned in the specific piece, but on this occasion he clearly hasn't felt he's crossed the line because he hasn't apologised, it seems.
Or certainly it hasn't led to an apology yet. Right, let's move on. We'll come back to that Roy Keane story a little bit later on, but of course if you've got a view on it, then we'd like to hear from you. Maybe we'll get a poll up and running as well at some point about whether or not Keane and O'Neill should actually be considered the right people to take this job forward. In the meantime, let's go back to the Camogie and we'll talk GAA in a second. That Slot Neil video is sending shockwaves through the GAA community. But yesterday at Croke Park, the rivalry between Cork and Kilkenny has been one of the best things about Camogie in recent seasons. There's proper needle between the two teams. Yesterday, the game wasn't a classic, not helped, as you've just heard, by some not great refereeing. Cork ended up winning by a single point. Let's hear from both of the managers speaking with Maura Trosney Kelly afterwards.
I'm joined now by Cork Banish. They were victorious not once but twice today. You must feel pretty good.
Hi, please look happy and delighted for both teams, to be honest. Like if we won one, I'd be disappointed. So delighted. We knew the second one was going to go down to the wire, which it did, and the intermediates, I always fancied our chances that if we played to our potential, we should win it.
Let's cut directly to the chase. That free at the 60th minute, it had you incensed.
It had, to be quite honest, because in fairness I just thought that Orla had the ball in her hand and she was going to ground. I didn't think she was fouled, to be quite honest. There's not an awful lot more I can say about it. I thought there was some very hard calls against us, but that's not again taken from Cork. They've got their win and I hold my hand up and congratulate him, but I don't think Eamon had his best day either.
I didn't see it, to be honest, and that's not avoiding the question. I was trying to bring on a sub at that stage, so I didn't see it. But look, the way refereeing has gone in Camogie, it's next to impossible now to referee it. I think that the teams have kind of outgrown the rules at this stage, and I think that certainly they have to come more in line with the hurling rules, really, to give a referee a fair crack at a whip.
For example, is there anything like would you pick up? Is it the physicality, perhaps? Is it the speed? What is it?
Oh, I think your contact, has to change. I've been saying it for the last number of years that you can't referee a game where you have 15 players from 30 players on the pitch, and with the fitness level of these girls now, and they're all conditioned right, that no contact to me. So that's certainly something that has to be looked at.
Game was like a pendulum, went back and forth, and they had it when it mattered, and possibly. I don't know why I didn't have a chance to see the replay. You obviously hadn't seen it either, but nobody in the press. And what was your assessment?
Well, again, as I've said, Orla was coming out with the ball in her hand and she went to ground. No one touched her. She was actually free of all her players. But I don't stand here and criticise the referee. It is what it is now, and we have to live with it. If Eamon is happy with his game, that's so be it. I can't really say any more on it.
Well, look, we have high standards, and I want to keep them as high as possible, to be honest. Certainly I wouldn't be happy with the use of the ball out of defence a few times. It annoyed me that we just pucked it away, and but look, I'm not going to analyse this one, to be very honest with you.
A nasty gash over the eye. We heard you had a clash with the photographer. How did it happen?
Cameraman ran into me, to be honest, and I must go looking for him later because I think I need a couple of stitches.
I haven't had time to speak to him. I suppose some of them are in the shower there, so we'll regroup now when we go back in and I'll have a word with him.
And assuming as well, at the end, you have to do the cursory handshake with the opposite body store. How did that go today?
I actually didn't meet Paddy yet, to be quite honest. I went looking for him on the pitch there, but I met some of the girls all right, but I will hopefully meet him before I leave here,
Probably not much consolation to you right now, but for the neutrals, it's a fantastic rivalry to watch, and Cork and Kilkenny have given people some real viewing pleasure and has done women's sport in Ireland a great service as well, and that's something I think you really need to be proud of.
Well, yeah, but it's not much consolation now today, to be quite honest, But, it's great to have two teams really go at it. I suppose the standard of Camogie in the last few years has been great, especially with Kilkenny and Cork in it, but, as I said, we're just devastated after today.
Yeah, great stuff from Croke Park there. Maura Trasny-Kelly speaking with both managers in the aftermath of a pretty controversial game, but another chapter in that rivalry writ large, so people will definitely be tuning into it next year. Now, Professor Niall Moyna is with us in studio and Cara Keane is with us on the line. You're both very welcome to us this morning. It's a bit of a state of the nation on the state of Gaelic football. Cara, I might start with you because it was your tweets that got the ball rolling yesterday. Schlockneil were playing Maherfelt in the Derry Football Championship, and we can roll the tape, and this is going to roll in the background while you describe what was happening. What did happen?
Not an awful lot for a long time. There was a spell of about it's hard because you didn't start timing it because you didn't expect it, but it was at least 3 minutes of the ball, basically Schlockneil keeping the ball on their own 45. Padraig Cassidy just soloed the ball. I would say somewhere between 40 and 50 times, almost standing on the spot, just dandering along the 45, back and forward. A couple of passes here and there, but that was all the excitement that was, and that was the way that about the last 3 or 4 minutes of the first half were played out. And Maherfelt, the team out of possession there, were a point down and playing with the gale force breeze at their backs. You can hear the crowd starting to boo there.
Yeah.
It was, it really was a sight to behold. It was just, seen a lot of things, but I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, where Maherfelt just point blank refused to press out, and Schlockneil point blank refused to go in. And what you ended up with was that stalemate of everybody standing looking at each other for 4 minutes of a championship game.
I don't think I've ever seen anything quite as pronounced as this. And this is in the build-up to half-time. Was this basically the whole match?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't as drastic as that for the entire game. Obviously, that it was it reached that point towards the end. You can hear the crowd starting to boo a bit there as well. It reached that point just at that spell towards the end of the first half, because Schlockneil were playing against a big wind. They were very happy to hold possession. They spent a lot of the first half holding possession, trying to slow the game down, which any team would do. But it was the fact that Maherfelt, who were playing with a massive breeze and just refused point blank to come out of the shape that they had set up, and they had set up obviously to frustrate Schlockneil and to try. Because just about everything over the last 5 years has been tried in Derry in order to beat them, and hasn't worked. So Maherfelt thought they'd try something else, but Schlockneil are quite happy to play that way, because they'll take it and the knowledge that they probably have better forwards, and they'll get over the line. They don't care whether it's 3-2 or 10-5 or whatever it is. 10-5
was the final score, right? So Schlockneil do actually end up winning this game by double scores, which. I know some people on Twitter were like, it doesn't matter who wins, but actually it does matter that this tactic didn't work for Maherfelt.
No, it didn't. No, I suppose that's where the criticism will come in then. I suppose they will feel that up to a point they justified it, because Schlockneil have been renowned in Derry as well for being a very attacking side down the years, and always entertaining to watch. But they haven't won a championship since 1978, and they have a crop of players that are capable of doing something more than they've done, and they would feel that they wanted to try something different. And
you mean Maherfelt? Sorry, yeah.
Maherfelt, yeah. At 7-4 down, about midway through the second half, they were still well in the game, and they got a goal chance, and Conor McCluskey pulled it wide. And now, had that gone in, they get themselves level. They maybe go on and win the game. They would feel everything at that point then is absolutely justified. I suppose it all comes down to the result in the end, and Schlockneil did pull away in the last few minutes, and I suppose Maherfelt's first score after 90 seconds of the game was their only score from play, the entire night. So you're definitely going to struggle to win when your emphasis is just entirely on the defensive end of it.
Yeah. Niall, I don't want to overreact to a single championship match in club football, and if it was just a single match in club football, you'd be a bit careful about what you were saying. But unfortunately, this appears to be a full-blown trend / fashion in Gaelic football at the minute.
Yeah, it's actually sad to see where Gaelic football currently is. It's an extremely poor spectacle. I've been to 2 games this summer. I mean, I would normally go 15, 20. Sometimes I go to 2 games a day. You couldn't pay me to go to watch a Gaelic football game now. It's absolutely appalling. And I think we have a responsibility to do something for our game. I gave a talk a few years ago at the AFL conference in Melbourne, and I spoke to some of the officials afterwards, and they had the same problem for a number of years. But they decided to address it, and they continually changed the rules. And when they changed the rules, the teams would catch up with that again, and they would continue changing the rules because they wanted to have it a spectacle. And their numbers now have increased dramatically. You just have to look at the attendance of the 2 All-Ireland semi-finals. For the first time in history, there was more attending the hurling, and rightly so. It's a game for the ages. If I was growing up now, if I was a young kid growing up in Ireland today, I wouldn't be playing football. Hurling would be my game of choice.
What are the rule changes? A couple of things before we get into the specifics of the rule changes. For me, the biggest issue has always been the fact that rule changes need to navigate their way through a 2/3 majority in Congress, as opposed to creating a standing committee which is elected, and you can, however you want to make that committee, which is the Standing Rules Committee, and their job is to change the playing rules of the game. The rules of the organisation, change those all you want to Congress and make sure that there's 2/3. But if you want to change the rule on a kick out, the fact that has to go to Congress, and generally it gets bundled in with 6 other rules, so they all rise or fall on the basis of votes of Congress. Wouldn't it be better just to come up with a group of people whose job it is year on year to make small iterations as you go?
Yeah, and I think the GEA are moving towards that. They realise that they have to change the current modus operandus. It's just what they're currently doing is simply not good enough. But the important thing is that whatever rule changes are made have to go all the way to under 12 and under 14 club level. And they're easy rules, to enact and to apply. I think that's the important issue. I mean, we have all these wonderful ideas of how to change the rules, and people say they should only apply to inter-county. That's not the way it should be. It should be across the board. There have been lots of wonderful suggestions put forward. For me, it's obvious that the hand pass is a huge, huge problem. And I think, it's easier to officiate 3 hand passes than it is 4 steps. In hurling and football, it's regular to see people take 5, 6, 7 steps. It's easy, 1, 2, 3. And I think that one simple rule could have a huge impact. I think the whole issue of scoring, I would have a new scoring zone, 35 metres out, an arc. Score outside that, you get 2 points. It means that players can't zone back in top of the D and play this defensive mode, because if you're getting 2 points, and would also promote shooting from outside, which would be brilliant, which is really out of our game.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is the whole issue about passing the ball back. Now, I don't know what the best way can you pass it back across. It has to be a simple rule that you can't pass it back maybe across your own halfway line. It's those sort of simple rules. Now, obviously, teams will catch up, and defensively they'll figure out how to get. But then we have to evolve.
Yeah.
We have to come up with new. We have to, because we're going to lose. We're going to lose out. We're going, not just in Gaelic football. We're going to lose many of our young players to other sports if we don't radically make changes.
Yeah, Car, you've obviously, unfortunately, borne witness on a personal level to a lot of this football. Not to tar the entire province with the same brush. What do you think are the best rule changes that need? Because that's in your tweet. You're like, rule changes absolutely needed. What do you want to see?
Well, Niall touched on it there about the idea of kind of the backcourt rule from basketball, where you cross halfway and you can't go back. It kind of simplifies it to a point where you cross a line and you can't go back over it. Other than, I would accept the opposition 45 from that rule, because I think the six, it's a method of building attack. You can come back around there, but you're still in the attacking zone. Whereas what you're seeing now is what you saw last night. Teams are in their defensive zone, keeping the ball. I think if you make it the halfway line, I think you'd still get maybe what you had last night, because teams would deliberately not cross the halfway line so that they can still come backwards. So I think if you make it that when they cross a line, they can't go back over it, I think it's fairly simple. I think it's much easier to implement. Like, ideally, I suppose people have talked about keeping a certain number of players up the pitch. I don't know how that would actually work in practice. Impossible to referee. I think it's too restrictive as well. What you'd end up with is an overload of maybe 13 or 14 attacking players against 11 defenders, because the other 3 or 4 aren't allowed to come back and help. And I don't necessarily think that would make for a great spectacle either. I suppose it'd make for a high scoring game, but you could end up with some awful hammerings if you're overloading the attack by 3 or 4 men. So there are. I do believe that it's a fairly simple rule of not being able to go back across the line that you've crossed. Once the ball hits a certain point, it shortens the pitch. It makes it much easier, because the big problem is, Niall mentioned hand pass. The big problem is the tackle is so poorly defined, and it's so easy to keep possession that even the team on the ball, the team trying to come out and press them. If Maherfield had come out last night, it is so hard to get the ball back. That because the surface area is so big, people are so good now at taking the ball under pressure, and the tackle is so poorly defined that by the letter of the law, most contact is a foul, and referees are inconsistent in applying it. So you can get to a man, you can make contact on him, and all you're going to do is give away a free, and the cycle starts over again. So if you bring that rule in where they can't go back across a line, it shortens the area in which the team in possession can play, and it makes it more likely that you'll be able to get effective contact on the man on the ball. So I certainly think that's something that's worth trialling in the new year at least.
That's also putting the pressure on the team without the ball. That's like saying the rule change is being implemented to try and stop what teams like Maherfield were doing last night, rather than it's actually changing what Shlott Neal were doing last night, because they can't cross back their line. Whereas should it not be the onus on the opposite team, the team that are sitting back, the team that are compiling themselves with this huge blanket defence? Like, it does seem that the wrong party is being punished here, if that makes sense. Like, how do you kind of counteract what's happening to the teams that are without the ball?
Look, it's a fair point, but I think you're talking about needing a spectacle, and this is part of the debate last night. Like, Shlott Neal, to me, did absolutely the right thing. No team with any sense would have done anything else than keep the ball out of that zone where Maherfield had 15 players standing. Why would you go in there when you're defending that, or you're a point up against that one? But it has to be a spectacle, and we have to try and get more players engaged. And as I said, the surface area, with the fitness levels that exist and the strength of players carrying the ball, the surface area has become so big. And it's got, Dublin were the saviours of Gaelic football for a while, but they've largely been the team driving this, and we've seen this from them for the last 2 or 3 years now, where they will not, when they're in a certain position in the game, they'll just not take the ball into contact. As much Tyrone were blamed for last year's All-Ireland semi-final, and, rightly so, they were the defensive team, and the onus was on them to come out. But that didn't make it, Dublin didn't do anything to make it any more of a spectacle either. And when neither team wants to be the team to make it a spectacle, then the rules have to change in order to allow it to become one. And to me, as I say, not that it has to favour the defensive team, but the change to me, it's the obvious change. I don't see what else you can logically do in order to invite the kind of contact that you'll need in the game in order to see the ball stripped from one team and go back to the other. Could you have a shot clock? Is that doable at under 12, under 14, under 16? You're shaking your head.
No, it's just not practical. Think of a lot of rural clubs. It just wouldn't be practical, I don't think.
Because you need somebody to administer the shot clock and press the button.
Yeah, and sometimes just getting a referee, that in itself can be onerous at times. Look, there are no easy solutions. One of the things that I find when you go to games,
the technology probably exists. Just to interrupt, and sorry, but the technology probably exists that the referee could press a button. It would be expensive, but if we're talking about absolutely changing the whole, there's enough money floating around. You could definitely get a sponsor for this, where there is a shot clock and the referee presses the button, and the whole stadium, the whole venue, whatever, it's a small ground, it's a small field, everybody knows there's 30 seconds on that, and there needs to be a shot in the next 30 seconds. If the referee was the one to administer it, like with wireless technology, it would be pretty easy to have a button that goes beside the scoreboard.
Yeah, but it's a large pitch, and every kid, every person playing has to be able to see it, and there are lots of issues there. Like in basketball, it's nice, it's a small court, so everyone can see it. One of the issues for me is that it's sort of the coaching that's going on. When you see teams that are behind and know that they have to get scores, and they're still playing in that defensive formation. So it's an ingrained, and I think a lot of the coaches have to take responsibility for this. And when you see it all the way down to under 12 and under 14 level now, you really have to worry for the future of the game.
I did want to ask about that whole thing about coaching, is that most sports go through this evolutionary phase where defensive coaches come in and very quickly they become very prized. So if you look at the evolution of professional rugby, it was awful for about 15 years after professionalism, because they hired all these rugby league coaches who just came in and closed the game down, and they fully understood how to close space down. Is it possible we're just in that phase? Like what at the end of the rugby phase, now granted they changed the rules, you have the All Blacks all singing, all dancing, and everybody is trying to pass off both hands and run lines at pace. Is there a possibility that the next evolution of Gaelic football is that we learn defensive structure, but also then how to start beating that defensive structure?
Yeah, up until a year ago, I would have agreed with you. I mean, I was in a programme here a few years ago, and I said every generation defines how the game is played, and I was totally opposed to changing the rules. I said the game would be much better for this, and you can see there is evolving, because even the way Dublin play, the way they probe, the game certainly has evolved. But we're at the stage where we're going to start losing our players, and that's the big issue. Can we wait another 4 or 5 years until we get to the next tranche and we've figured this out? I don't think we can. I think it's that urgent that it needs to be seriously addressed.
What happened in the last 12 months that changed your mind?
Just the utter garbage. Like watching that and going to see this on club grounds and county grounds. Even Dublin, one of their games this year in the Leinster Championship, the last 10 minutes, and there were 6 or 8, 10 points up. And who pays, who wants to go to see that? And then you switch on the TV and you watch a hurling game, and it's, oh my God, it's a thrill a minute.
Yeah.
So it's like watching paint dry, it's in slow motion. And I think because of that, and I do agree that every generation defines. My dad was catch and kick, and her generation, it was hand passing, quick foot passing, and now it's a very defensive. And I think it was a natural evolution in the game, because there was no defensive structure in Gaelic game. You put a corner back in, you just stayed in there, and to be fair, and I've said this, the Jim McGuinness gets a lot of slack, but he should get credit as well, because he found a way to improve the quality of his team and to make sure that he took the best of all the assets he had to win in All Ireland. But I think now that the fact that sort of play is inculcated down, and Gaelic football because there's no offside rule, it's very, very difficult to overcome the defensive game that we currently have. And I just think it is killing the game year on, game by game.
Who can fix this? Whose job is it to fix this now?
I think the GAA realise that they do have a problem, and they have asked the counties to submit potential solutions to this. And I agree with your idea. They've got to set up a select group that does not have to go through Congress, that can make these changes on a yearly basis. Nearly every single game at club level, never mind county level, is now videoed. So there's lots of evidence. They can take all of this data, they can accumulate the data and say, look, here's the patterns that are now emerging. How do we overcome that? And be proactive rather than reactive.
So that's the job for the president and that side of the House of Croke Park, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Car, what do you want to happen?
In terms of the rule changes?
Yeah, the process that happens next. Because, after that video went viral last night, there's going to be a massive, long winter of everybody talking about rule changes. And for something tangible to happen, we just need to start trying stuff.
This is it. I suppose, as you say, stuff has to go through Congress in order to get anywhere. Part of the problem with getting stuff through Congress is that, you'll find that counties can oppose rule changes because the clubs aren't necessarily that bothered what way their county executive votes, but the county management might be, and there could be pressure from that end, and all of a sudden you get a wave of support against a change in the rules because certain counties don't like it, it doesn't suit the way they're playing, whatever, and that can absolutely affect it. And I think that's wrong. The people taking the advantage from it shouldn't be the people that dictate what way the rules are. So you're absolutely right. You need a committee that comes up with ideas and implements it themselves. I would like to see the January competitions, the FPD, the McKenna Cup, have a wave of rules. Not necessarily a wave, just have a couple of rules trialed, see how they get on. if they're worth exploring in the long term.
Doesn't history teach us though that the intercounty managers get the veto? Because you remember Mickey Hart in the sin bin. It was like, I'm absolutely not having this. This is no good. It existed in January and it was gone by March, April.
Well, I think the game is in a much poorer place than it was then. I mean, Gaelic football is dying unless it's radically addressed, and it can be a phenomenal game. You only have to look at the Dublin Kerry game about 3 years ago, the semi-final. I mean, it was just an absolutely phenomenal. Even last year's final, when two teams go out and decide they're going to play, and I'm not saying traditional game, you know what I mean? You'd be stupid to go out and play man against man. But to put 15 guys behind the ball and to hold on to the ball for 2, 3, 4 minutes and not let the opposition get it, that's never what Gaelic games was ever meant to be, or particularly Gaelic football was ever meant to be.
That's great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks very much for coming into studio, Niall. Thanks to you, Car, for talking to us this morning about this. You can tell that it's going to run and run and run. So let's just play you this from the pay-per-view yesterday. It's Kieran Shannon and Marie Crowe. We're in talking with Joe, talking about the Dubs, obviously, and here's Kieran talking about Jim Gavin.
Jim Gavin was over 4 or 5 other teams in the bracket, in the Super 8 bracket. They'd have won in All-Ireland, at least, in the last few years. If Jim Gavin was involved with Kerry, it comes down to the training field. It's no coincidence that Limerick are the hurling champions and Dublin are the football champions, and it goes back to the opposite of Martin O'Neill. The old Pete Carroll line, practice is everything, where you asked him about his practice, he said you're limited what to do. Dublin have the best training. It's not that because they have the best players they have the best training session. They're the best players because they have the best training session. Paul Kinnerk with Limerick and the way he coaches, they have what's going on in that training, the environment that he's created. And I heard someone say about Alan Brogan's piece was rubbish by someone online I saw saying, Stephen Cluxton just works hard. It's a pity, like some of the other teams, like I think David Clark was referenced, a pity he doesn't do that. But is he working as efficiently with best practice the way that a Gavin, a Jason Sherlock, who are on it, and Jason Sherlock's not getting paid. Jason Sherlock is the biggest reason why one of the biggest reasons, or the way of Gavin having the humility and the sight to say, that guy, we're talking about hungry coaches, he's on it.
Yeah, there's definitely another side to this whole Dublin story which is getting lost, which is, only giving them further annoyance and grievance when it comes to next season. I did feel like maybe this year was going to be the year where they blitzed everybody, and they did kind of, but there's also the possibility that they just decide to blitz teams and to go at them for the final 15, 20 minutes when their game is already won, to run the score up.
As in, they could do that, but they chose not to do it.
They chose not to do it this year, yeah.
Yeah.
I think next year they might choose to run the score up if everybody keeps going, nah, you were just winning because of the money.
And it gets worse. Like, we did say this, I think, in June, July, that it was going to be Dublin's easiest All-Ireland, and that certainly proved to be the case. It also, by extension, proved to be one of the dullest conclusions to an All-Ireland Championship. And it does kind of come back to what we were just, the topic of conversation before that video, about the style of play, about the way football is going, as in, you can't really blame Dublin for this whatsoever. In fact, do we have to thank Dublin for a couple of the great games we've got over the last couple of years? The way Mayo and Kerry have just had to say at some point, screw it, we're just going to have to throw caution to the wind and try and hope that our attacking philosophy actually beats Dublin. Whereas if the standard was a little bit lower from Dublin, maybe the likes of Mayo and Kerry would have felt a lot more empowered by a defensive style of play, just like Kerry felt in the 2014 All-Ireland final. It wasn't Dublin, it was Donegal. They felt like they could sit back, they felt like they could play a brand of football which was shite in comparison to what they had played all summer. Yeah. They won the All-Ireland. Yeah. So maybe we actually have to say thank you very much to Dublin, because you've actually, you're so dominant that other teams have actually had very little fear at some stages when they come up against you. But
it'd be great if you could model some software to go, how long do we have to sit and watch this shit before it gets good again? Like, the World Cup that England won in 2003, they won with penalties and drop goals. You can't win a Rugby World Cup anymore with penalties and drop goals, because the game evolved and changed, and that Grim Reaper style coaching, people started to look for space, and it took a while to, and it's not fully finished. Rugby is definitely not a perfect sport. There's still loads of crap games in it, but at least they put the emphasis on finding space and attacking and offloading, and they helped to change the rules with like subtle enough changes to offside and all that kind of stuff that it got better. It did take quite a while. Maybe, certainly the point that Niall's making, it doesn't feel like GA has that long to wait before it reaches a point where no one's going to the matches anymore because, well, Dublin are going to win by 10 points anyway, and this could be a very close game between two sides, but is there going to be a guy toe tapping in his own defence, looking at everybody going, I'm not doing anything, you're not doing anything? We'll be in the all draw.
It is like that Simpsons scene where they show soccer and it's just teams passing it over and back constantly, which was probably how soccer was viewed for a time. Like we were saying before we came on air, that the next rule change is probably going to be, if the rule change comes, the back pass eradication in soccer, which is, like, in hindsight, an unbelievably important moment in how the game changed. But just on that rugby point, I wonder, would rugby have taken a lot longer to evolve or change at all if, say, New Zealand were the winners of that 2003 World Cup, if the aristocrats of rugby were the ones playing crap football? And I'm not saying Dublin are playing crap football, but they're winning All-Irelands in a landscape which is providing us with terrible spectacles every single week. They've got the power, they've got all the cards in their hands. Who can stop them using the swashbuckling style? Well, maybe a couple of counties can, but you would wonder how long it would have taken for rugby to transform into the style where we've seen New Zealand kind of kill everybody now, if they were the ones playing crap rugby in 03.
It's a good question. I mean, it might never have happened because, it suited New Zealand, so therefore...
Exactly.
Tommy said, I saw Shawnee Johnson do it for Cavan Gales in last year's Cavan Senior Football Championship against Kings Court Stars. The Gales were against a really strong wind and were leading by 1 coming up to half-time. Kings Court sat back and Johnson just soloed the ball on his own in the middle of the pitch as nobody pushed up. Gales won 2-10 to 8 points. I mean, the wages of sin or death. We should remember this, that all the teams who are doing this end up getting beaten and ultimately find some humiliation. So maybe this is just their really bad coaching and I'm not saying last night was an example of it, but maybe that strain of coaching is slowly being strangled out. And actually, this is just the process that you get to the end of it, where the games end up being end up being Mayo against Kerry or Mayo against Dublin, because that's what everybody's trying to get to. We're just about 18 months away from those coaching systems filtering into the club game.
Yeah, well, it certainly can't get worse than that spectacle we saw from Derry last night. So maybe we are at the lowest ebb, and when you're at the lowest ebb, the only way is up. So maybe this is kind of just part of the process of making Gaelic football watchable again, where we get to this nadir where, like, that's laughable. It is laughable, really, what we saw last night. Like, I'm surprised we didn't actually hear more chortles in the crowd from that. It was actually just more booing in that Slot-Neil Marifels game, because it's comical stuff. It's, like, obviously it's embarrassing, but it's a parody of a sport. And, you know, like, you've actually got to commend the coaching that has such a temerity there that they can actually follow through with that.
Yeah. The extracts from Sean Cavanagh's book are in, and they're in today's Indo, and they're gold. He rang to apologise, but Brawley's attack on my character hurt my family. Fair enough. I felt betrayed. I never properly forgave Mickey. Hart's actions on the day I took ill and the nonsense in his book were an insult. It broke the respect barrier between us. That's mad when you think about it.
Yeah, so the Hart stuff, obviously we'd known. It was quite clear from earlier on this season, especially, that there was something simmering there, something bubbling over when Sean Cavanagh said that Mickey Hart was basically holding them back. The tactics just weren't good enough. They weren't going to win an All-Ireland under Mickey Hart. And I think this is kind of illuminating a little bit more what the exact problems were, that, you know, he's a man who's taken a lot of personal flack from people, including Mickey Hart. Like, we thought, looking from the outside in, that Joe Brawley was the chief perpetrator of abuse towards Sean Cavanagh. I'm actually surprised to hear Joe Brawley actually picked up the phone to apologise to him. The unapologetic nature of Joe Brawley's commentary is surely what he prides himself on. So I'm surprised to hear he actually apologised for that. I suppose he knew he was going to be a future colleague of his, so it kind of made business sense.
I was in Fanula's house when I was handed the paper. Roof caved in, screamed the headline. Interesting. I thought, what roof could that be? And then in disbelief I read the text. Turns out I was the one under the falling timber and masonry. Mickey's tale on the morning of that semi-final was very different to mine. He felt that I had buckled under pressure. The roof simply caved in on me. He was puzzled when I told him I was wrecked and hadn't slept all night. The extract suggested that Mickey wanted to see things from my perspective, but that, apart from a few isolated flashes of brilliance, my form hadn't been great all season. And then later it's... His gist seemed to be that the phrasing was down to the ghostwriter and gave a different spin from what was intended, that the context became blurred. But I wasn't buying that. In fact, that explanation annoyed me even more. I felt he should have stood over what appeared in print. It had been a dramatic enough headline and probably sold a few books. So I felt he should have said, Sean, that's what I thought at the time. I wouldn't have been ecstatic with that response, but it would have seemed more honest.
So just to reiterate, when does this happen?
So Mickey's book comes out, obviously, I don't know what year Mickey's book comes out, but this is about the semi-final. So there's a game when he doesn't start, 2009, is that right?
That was around when the book came out.
Semi-final against Cork.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cavanagh got sick the night before the semi-final, right?
Yeah.
And doesn't sleep, has hot sweats and everything, goes to Mickey and says, look, I'm a bit sick here. And Mickey puts it down to like a psychological thing as opposed to just illness.
Like, the thing is, this happened such a long period of time ago that you'd wonder how they managed to maintain a decent working relationship for whatever the preceding 7 or 8 years towards the end of Sean Cavanagh's inter-county career. Like, I don't think they go into too much detail about what happens after that. It's probably in the book in full, but from that extract, you just don't know whether or not they managed to brush it under the carpet, if they managed to resolve that all, because it does seem like, when he mentions the Brawley stuff there, in fairness, Brawley picked up the phone to him, those kind of attacks on Cavanagh's character, particularly kind of that question of honesty, the integrity of Cavanagh, perhaps faking illness before an All-Ireland semi-final. And that's one hell of an accusation to make of one of your star players.
Not faking illness, no. The
psychological... Well,
he couldn't handle it.
But it's essentially Cavanagh coming out saying that I was sick, I wasn't sleeping, I was kind of under the weather. To a certain extent, Hart's not buying that, is he?
Well, he is. He's saying that you can't play then.
But it's a psychological thing rather than a physical thing.
Yeah. So that was the book.
That's it's heavy stuff. Like, it's going to be an interesting read. I didn't think he'd kind of go 2 feet in on him just like that. It's going to be like you're finding new nuggets as you read paragraph by paragraph.
Important bit here. Mickey wrote of how there was a lot going on in my life, from an impending marriage to my role as secretary of the GPA and too many media and commercial commitments.
A lot going on, all right. That's it's almost as if there was an ulterior motive there. Who knows? That's going to be actually a brilliant read. We thought Cavanagh used up all his good stuff in his early interviews as a pundit, but there's plenty left there, it seems.
Yeah, it's on the back of the Irish News as well. This is more. This stuff's a little bit different. I didn't make the Hart comment just for the headlines. This was when he was calling him, was it autocratic? And Horst Devlin had a go at him to say that, well, maybe if we'd had a better captain over the last couple of years, we might have got through to an All-Ireland final. And that the bonds of the 05-08 team were just a little bit taken out. So, war in Tyrone.
War in Tyrone. There's always war in Tyrone. There's war in Tyrone whenever Sean Cavanagh is saying stuff like that. I'd actually like to hear what Mickey Hart's response is to that. I'm sure he might take a call in the coming weeks to talk about Sean Cavanagh again. It's a great feud. It's like one of the great ex-players, current manager feuds we've seen in modern times. It's popcorn for me all the way during this. I think it's great.
Who went straight into punditry as well. It's like normally there's a bit of a gap. You're like, oh, I can't wait to see. But actually, straight into punditry about the team that he was playing on last year.
Yeah.
For which his brother is still the best player. A quick one. To celebrate the opening of Boyle Sports 250th shop, we want to send you and a friend to a Premier League match of your choice. Not only will you get tickets to the game, but also 250 quid spending money for your chance to win. Text time to play and your details to 53106 for 30 cents. The winner will be announced on OTB AM on Wednesday. Tickets, of course, will be subject to availability, and we'll be picking daily finalists each day to go through to the draw on Wednesday morning. So just text the words time to play and your details to 53106. That'll cost you 30 cents. You've got to be over 18 to enter this. It's to celebrate the opening of Boyle Sports 250th shop.
Just to go through some of the other back pages. We were going through these earlier on. The big story, particularly from the tabloids, is in the Irish Sun this morning and also in the Irish Daily Mail. The heat is on, reads the headline in the Irish Daily Mail this morning. Intense scrutiny on O'Neill as details of alleged row leaked. So we brought you that earlier on. The Irish assistant manager is alleged to have told Arthur he didn't rate him as a player and that he'd never give him a game if he was in charge. And again, sensitive ears here, he called him a prick and a wanker, and that's also carried in the Sun as well. Roy's rage, X-rated Keane went in hard on Harry. That's they're extraordinary details, really. It's great that the actual terms have come out here. I guess that is a line. Once those words are used, like if I was Harry Arthur, that's probably a line crossed. You know, you could use other words, maybe like dickhead, shithead.
That'd be fine.
That'd be fine.
Prick and wanker is
like that. That's the exact blurring of the line here. That's the exact moment when it goes. That's probably just a little bit too far.
It depends. I mean, you good-naturedly call people names all the time in real life. One does.
Well, yeah, one does. Like you could call people names. Like it would be probably.
Don't be a. would be fine.
Yes, it's obviously in the context of this. Or if, like, they were having a game of cards and, Harry Arter pulled a quick one and Roy Keane's like, you prick.
Yeah, totally fine. That's legit.
I'm sure it was in much more serious circumstances than that.
As opposed to, you think you're a player, if you wouldn't be in my team, you prick.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, like we can only speculate about what context it was used, but it certainly seems, these are well-placed sources here, that those words were indeed used. And I can only trust that they were used in a way that Harry Arter felt. That's actually not just banter, to use Richard Key's phrase.
You're the assistant manager.
Yeah, actually, you've got a position of power there.
You're picking the team, or involved in the picking of the team here.
Like, he's obviously moved on from Roy Keane, and now he's working under Neil Warnock at
Cardiff City
come on.
Stuff, so he's not a shrinking violet either.
No.
So, like, did he fire back?
Well, it doesn't seem that. It seems that...
Can I just say, imagine Johnny Walters being called a prick and a wanker by Roy Keane. He is straight back to him, going, and you are whatever. Like, and there is some merit to what Martin O'Neill is saying about Johnny Walters showed up. It's like, come on, this is just an argument in football. Like, stuff happens in the dressing room. Now, Keith was very good on this on the Keith Andrews show last Wednesday. Normally it's on a Thursday, but it was on Wednesday because of the Ireland game last week, where he was saying that you do have these rows all the time, but you tend not to have them with the assistant manager. there is a kind of a different role for the managerial team whose job it is to actually, say, get out there and kill them, come on.
Yeah, like, does the manager look at this between players? Say if those words were exchanged between players, does he look at that and say, that's passion, that's good, I like it?
Yeah.
But maybe, like, what's the difference between it happening between players and happening between, like, a staff member and a player? Obviously, there should be kind of a different coach-player relationship, sort of a mentor-mentee relationship in the whole thing, rather than one of kind of mutual aggression. But it seems to have tipped into the latter there, which is sort of an unusual one for any setup. But maybe this setup is just unusual. Maybe the fact that Roy Keane is your assistant manager means that this is going to be no ordinary setup. This isn't like the usual standards by which an assistant manager is judged doesn't apply to Roy Keane, given the character that he is. When is Roy Keane at his best? When he's at his fieriest. But maybe at his fieriest best doesn't necessarily apply to a coaching role. Maybe that was the best way to get the best out of a player, Roy Keane. So, I don't know, maybe Martin O'Neill is looking at Roy Keane as if he was his manager as a player, rather than as his manager when he's his assistant.
So how do we get out of this?
How does the situation resolve?
Yeah.
Well, like, if that's the worst that was used, it's like an expletive that is kind of thrown about. Like, it might just be kind of like a trigger word you have when you're pissed off at somebody and you use that word. It's nothing overly personal, dare I say. Like, would you be personally offended if that was said to you?
I mean, I'd kind of be excited of getting called prick and a wanker by Roy Keane. Yay!
Yeah,
I'm joining an illustrious club here.
There's obviously a sense of an achievement, given that you're not a professional footballer, and then suddenly Roy Keane's calling you prick and a wanker. Like, that'd be amazing. But in the context of you being Harry Arter, would you be offended? Like, I'm not sure everybody would be. Like, you're kind of taken aback by it, and there's something bemusing about it, and it is, I guess you could say, it is disrespectful. But maybe over a period of time, you're like, well, actually, he wasn't being overly personal there. It was kind of how he views his professional relationship when he's annoyed with a player, and maybe I've just got to get on with that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being too kind to Roy Keane.
What else have we got?
It is Ireland actually dominating the back pages this morning. As I say, they are the only two pages to lead with those two words. The Herald Sport is O'Neill's striker crisis for Poland. So this is Curtis called up for friendly as options narrow. You've also got the All-Ireland Junior Camogie final there. Dublin, the champions, beating Kerry on a 112-6 scoreline. That is the Herald. The Mirror then this morning is Kurt Reply, ex-Derry star Ronan, glad to answer Ireland's call as striker crisis bites. And you've also got the Camogie story there. It's a brilliant photo of Ty Scannell, son of Cork's breach Corkery in the O'Duffy Cup yesterday after their Camogie All-Ireland win. No direction, says the back of the Irish Daily Star. FAI leadership is a shambles and system failure stems from the top. And you've got tears of joy for Rebelettes. And Serena's €15,000 slap on wrist. So a $17,000 fine for her behaviour at Flushing Meadows at the weekend.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's pretty much it. That's just a supplement from inside the Irish Daily Mail. O'Neill puts under-21 ace Curtis into pole position.
All right, just a reminder, OTBAM is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. So we're going to hear from Alan Quinlan in just a moment. First, here is Dennis Buckley from Connacht talking with Oisín Langan after their win over Zebre.
Dennis, from the players' point of view, how important was a win like that, and I suppose the style of it as well?
Yeah, like last week was really disappointing. Like I think outside of the group it was probably a bit more positive than it was inside, in terms of like people were saying, oh, it was a really good performance, like hard luck, he just came short, but we knew that we should have won, and that was what was really frustrating in the kind of inner group of the squad. So yeah, to come out today and you know, last week probably our forwards didn't perform as well as we would have liked, especially at home. That's pretty frustrating for us. So I think to go out and perform like we did today is really positive. And on top of that, then it's difficult conditions for both teams, but we managed that really well. You know, if you start trying to force things in that weather, before you know it, it's a 50-50 game. And I think we found a weapon in terms of our scrum. We used that well. We controlled the game. We didn't try and force things. You know, it was whatever, when they went down to 13 men, that we really hammered them home. We weren't forcing it up until then. And yeah, just a really, really professional, well-managed performance.
Yeah, exactly what Connacht needed from the game against Eber. Alan Quinlan is here. Alan, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, Ger. Yeah.
Not the straightforward weekend of 4 Irish province victories that maybe we're becoming slightly accustomed to. But let's talk about Connacht first. It is a really important season for everybody in Connacht, and I've made this point already, to remember that they are much closer to the team who won the league than the team that they had last season, and they've got to be ruthless and they've got to be efficient, and they can't be losing home games.
Yeah, they can't, and I think the disappointment of last week, obviously it's an easier game against Zebra this week, but you know, they got a bit of confidence, and their attack was really good against a really strong Glasgow side, but ultimately they lost that game, and you know, they had a very 9-point lead with probably 15 minutes to go, 20 minutes to go in that game, and so it was important that they got a good performance against Zebra, and a convincing one, a bonus point win.
Yeah, Paul Boyle is 21. I'm just reading about him today. He got 27 minutes under Keane last season, which I think was in one of the interprovincial games where he stuck him in and took him off, and that was it.
Yeah, that was against Munster, I think.
Yeah, and it turns out he's actually pretty good. You know, sometimes you need to look after your talent and gently introduce them and put them in teams.
Yeah, I think, look, I wouldn't blame Keane for that last year as such, because we didn't know a lot about him. He was, to be fair, he was very promising and strong and good under 20s. He was the under 20 captain at the Junior World Cup in 2017. He's obviously moved out of the Leinster academy. I don't think he made the academy.
Right, so he's sub-academy. Right.
And trying to get an opportunity to go. So he was brilliant on Saturday and looks full of confidence, looks very athletic, physical. And Andy Friend was, you know, giving huge compliments to him after the game, and speaking about how he's going to improve and become hopefully a stalwart for them.
Do we know much about Andy Friend's style just yet? I mean, it's obviously very early on to be kind of saying, oh yeah, you can clearly see
it's going to be open and expansive, and I think it's a much more calmer kind of give the players a bit of freedom approach maybe than Kieran Keane. I think Kieran Keane wanted an open, expansive game, but probably didn't manage the personalities as well as maybe Andy Friend seems very upbeat, very kind of relaxed, and he's worked on creating a very positive vibe and a happy culture there, as opposed to maybe a relentless kind of pressurised environment that maybe didn't really suit that group last year under Kieran Keane. Because we have to remember, we're kind of lambasting Kieran Keane a little bit, and we have done, and he's to take some flack for that, but he was very successful in New Zealand in his coaching. I just think his approach wasn't the right approach last year with Connacht, and I think Andy Friend has come in and tried to really work on positivity and making the players positive. They are going to lose some games, but I think he's given them a bit of freedom and worked on that skill set, and they looked, like I said, against Glasgow last week, they looked exciting to watch again. They looked confident.
Yeah. When it comes to someone like Boyle, who to a lot of people it's kind of like bursting on the scene, so to speak, at the weekend with a performance like that, how, like within the Joe Schmidt camp, do you have to be at this outset to actually make a World Cup squad? Can somebody like Boyle, who is quite removed from the camp, like you wouldn't even have him anywhere near the picture before last week, is it too late now, or is there a possibility that he gets in, he gets to know the Schmidt camp, and Schmidt gets to know him a little bit?
He'd have to have an extraordinary season, but I think if he does well for a while, and I think Joe Schmidt has been good at bringing guys in to train with the group, if they're someone who can go into the squad and play for Ireland in the future. So I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Boyle goes on to feature prominently for Connacht, that Joe Schmidt will call him in and have him training with the group, and that's a very sensible thing to do, and he's done that very regularly over the last couple of years, where he's brought in young guys. When Robbie Henshaw came on the scene first with Connacht, I think he trained Jordan Larmour, these guys. They were in before any of us knew anything about it, and they tend to keep
when he was doing his leaving cert.
Yeah, very young, and they tend to keep it quiet, not to put the pressure on him that I trained with Ireland, and so I think he could do, but I think he just has to enjoy his rugby now. He's only 21. There'll be a little bit more focus on him now, even though it's only against Zebra. So if he comes up and plays in the Interpros against Leinster, Munster or Ulster, how is he going to perform then? Is he going to play 80 minutes? Is he going to mix it with international back rows that he's going to come up against? But still very, very young.
Good to have that strength and depth in the back row, because we desperately need some strength.
We need some back rows,
Neil Cronin's injury in the Glasgow game, was this the incident where they couldn't find
It was.
So they'll go to the TMO so Neil Cronin he's carted off injured with what looks like a fairly serious injury, and it appears to have happened at a ruck where somebody comes in and torpedoes into the ruck.
Callum Gibbons, the 7 for Glasgow, he's abrasive, he's a very good player, super player, and he comes in quite aggressively with a swinging arm, and it was in from the side as well.
Referee goes to the TMO and the footage doesn't exist, or the angle isn't there. Which is it? I mean, I don't want to accidentally start a conspiracy theory here, but what happened?
Well, the TMO, I'm just checking it, was Neil Patterson, and Ben Whitehouse saw something at the corner of his eye, and to be fair, the camera angle is back a little bit and it's hard to get in close. It looks like it's a bit of a charge into the ruck. He damages his shoulder, he goes off injured afterwards, and Ben Whitehouse, he said, I saw something out of my eye there, Neil, can you go and check that? And then for some strange reason Neil Patterson can't find it. He showed him a number of clips of previous rucks, and just that ruck wasn't there. So
have you seen this happen before?
Never. And I've sat in those trucks, and there's producers there, and it's the producer or the director needs to answer questions why they couldn't show the footage. Very, very, I suppose, unprofessional, if you like. And, it's something that we rely a lot on, this footage and TMOs now. And you imagine if it's a try and they can't find it. How can you not find the footage? The footage is there. You just had a recording. So somebody needs to come out and say why that footage wasn't there. Now, it was one of those 50-50s that, was it a charge in? Did he have an arm? Did he use the shoulder? So we can't say it was a yellow or red, or maybe he wasn't punished and he just physically went in and cleaned him out. But I think not being able to find the footage in this modern day is
madness.
It's crazy.
From Munster's perspective, they were getting absolutely annihilated in that first half. Second half performance is much different. Second half performance also features a different team. There's significant changes. Tyke Byrne makes his debut. Carbery comes off the bench. Jack O'Tarty ends up coming on as well. What's the difference between the first and second half?
I think that when you go and play Glasgow, very strong side. They showed that against Connacht the week before. It's not an easy place to go, the sports ground, and get a result. And 13 internationals on the fields. And Ollie Kebbell, the South African loosehead, is a super player as well, and probably international standard. And Callum Gibbons will become Scottish qualified next year. So you could effectively say that 15 international standard players, very strong, full strength. And so, Munster need to learn from that a little bit, some of the younger players. And I think some of them are not young fellas anymore. Physically, just to get... they made mistakes and Glasgow punished them. They're a very good side, so it's not a place, it was always going to be a difficult result, but it was a similar result to last year where physically they got out-muscled a little bit. And then in the second half, they showed this reaction and this aggressive reaction. So again, it's probably another steep kind of learning curve for them. There's no need to panic, obviously, because Munster have a lot of guys to come back into the squad. The big positives, I thought Carbery looked superb when he came on.
Why is he not starting?
Jaco Taute. Look, I think it's a case of feeding him back into the system like some of the internationals are. So it's and it's probably given JJ Henron a fair shot as well and a fair crack there. But look, when you're 22 points down on any team, there's always going to be a reaction, isn't there? You're always going to come out. The other team maybe sit back a bit cagey, and Munster were pounding away maybe another little concern is all the possession and all the territory they had in the second half. They forced a few passes, they knocked on a ball and they turned it over. But they'll get some positives. It took them 69 minutes to get a try. Reece Marshall.
Somebody actually recorded the scandal incident, the Cronin incident off the TV. Have a look at this. So you can just hear in the bottom left there, that's what you're looking at there. So it's slow and on repeat. You can't kind of see the bit. The important bit is, does the arm swing at the end?
Yeah, you can see a swinging arm, and like it's kind of hard. But you see Ben Whiteout is right there, how he can say in the corner of my eye when he's looking in at the ruck. He needs to call that himself. But to be fair, he's relying on his TMO to help him there. Things happen so quickly. It looks like a bit of a charge in and a swinging arm, but we can't see the contact on the player.
That's almost on fast forward there, the
it's very quick,
rapidness of that swing.
But how they cannot find the footage is beyond a joke. It's, to be fair, I'm just... I could say a few more bits on it, but...
So Cronin looked like he's got game, right? He looks like...
Yeah, he looks very good. He's robust, and I'm not surprised from his performances in the AIL, and it's a shame for him now because this would have been a great kind of time for him to get a number of games, and if he's out for a number of weeks now, it's a big setback for him.
He's Sean Cronin's brother.
Sean Cronin's brother, yeah. Sean Cronin's a Munster man as well, yeah. Who probably wasn't getting games at the start and moved on, but I think he's a really good player, and it's nice to see someone. I think he sends out a nice message as well that he's 26 and maybe he would have been called in and a lot of promise when he was younger. Then kind of just went playing club and teaching, and that he's good enough to come back to it, and I think he is good enough to play.
One of the best things we can do in sport is to make sure that the late bloomers don't slip through the net, and like there's loads of people who end up, for whatever reason, Irish sport is littered with late bloomers who come into their own 26,
and
27.
Sometimes it's a case of maybe they were studying or they didn't have the passion, desire, maybe they thought they were going on a different path, and then they get into a nice, comfortable, relaxed place and say, I'm going to give this a crack. So we shouldn't discourage people in their mid-20s from getting onto an inter-county team or getting on a professional rugby team or a soccer team or whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. No one's panicking yet about that. Just in terms of the physicality though, like they do have some...
Billy Holland is injured as well, which is a blow from, and he captained the side the other night, but yeah, that physicality is probably, and it's something you don't associate with him, but when, look, Edinburgh, they're niggly, they're strong, they're a very good side, and they're experienced, and they came out of the blocks, and that was their goal, blow them away in the first half, and that happened. But there's lots of positives in the second half, the reaction, but I think Johan van Graan was more frustrated by that incident and maybe some mistakes and errors, and
he seemed very pissed off.
Yeah, you can see it in the guy's face, but look, there's no need to panic. They play the Ospreys next week now, and an opportunity to get a result.
Like he was saying after the game, it was quite an abrupt interview, I guess, to put it kindly, on Air Sport afterwards, where his answers were quite short, and he says it's just the second game of the season, whereas the way he said that, it kind of sounds like it's a bit more important in his own mind than the second game of the season. It's kind of like this continued period from the start of his Munster period, and that honeymoon period is definitely over at this point.
Yeah, it is the second game, but I think you build a bit of momentum from winning, and that would have made a good statement, not just externally but internally, that you can go and take on a side as good as Glasgow, and probably it's the manner you lose. If you lose by a couple of penalties and you're in the game, and I think it was just that manner of going 22 points down, and Glasgow just looked very, very strong and on the front foot a lot. So I think whether this morning in their video review and stuff, there'll be some harsh words and strong words, but yeah, we hear about this stamping the authority, and that's what he's got to do now. He's got to ask the questions, why this went wrong, that went wrong, and how we can do things differently.
Like, there's going to be a lot of things over the next few months and over the next 12 months that are going to be a little bit out of Van Graan's control. Like, just reading Brendan Fanning in the Sindo yesterday, just talking about the Joey Carbery situation, where Van Graan quietly will be expecting Carbery to be available to him the week before that Italy game in Chicago, because like they're expected to put out a second team or whatever in Chicago for that particular Italy game. So ordinarily Joe Schmidt would want to have Carbery in the camp and everybody there together, whereas Van Graan on this occasion, because he's not playing that week and probably the weekend after, he'll probably be expecting him. I want him for Munster, and that there might be a little bit of kind of friction there perhaps.
Yeah, It depends how the results are going, because he has other fly halves options. If Tyler Blandell is back, Ian Keatley is back, JJ Hanrahan, it mightn't come into a stage we want him, and it mightn't get touchy. I don't think it will. I think he'll understand the situation, and I think Joey Carbery will probably start against Italy, so I wouldn't think he'll be available for them if he's going to be playing the following week. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
You can't take a job in Irish rugby as a coach and halfway through decide that you're going to get pissed off when they start taking players off you.
You know from the start, and there's plenty of communication there, I think.
Some people in the past didn't fully understand it.
Yeah,
Matt
O'Connor didn't.
But everybody else understands it now.
Like, there's every chance he's completely fine with that. I'm just speculating.
I think he will be. I think he will be, and he'll know the score. And like I say, he has other options there as well, which he'll have to try and give those guys game time as well.
We were talking about potential bolters for the Ireland squad, and is Jean Klein going to make the Ireland squad? Is that is he at that level at the moment?
He needs a good season, but I like him. I think he's very physical, he's very strong, and he works incredibly hard. I think when you see off slow ball, when you see him coming around the corner, he's one guy who can really get through. He's not good footwork for a big guy, and he can get through between the two tacklers. And then when he has to run straight and put the head down, he's a bit of an enforcer, really.
Yeah.
Very, very strong on the maul. He pulls
a little bit different
down
from some of the other things that we have. A bit more James Ryan than Devon Toner, is he?
He's a Backy's Bota type player, Donegal Callan type player. I mean that respectfully, because I think if you have your left hand side second, or the guy who jumps at the front of the line out, who is a bit more physical, a bit more aggressive, maybe better sometimes without the ball, because they impose themselves around the field, and then you have your second or the number 5 who jumps in the middle of the line, or who's a little bit more silky with the skills, gets the ball in his hands a little bit more, calls the lineouts. That's your kind of perfect balance. We see a lot more athletic kind of footballing second rows playing together nowadays. You look at Retallick, he's a brilliant footballer for the All Blacks, but he's a bit of an enforcer as well, and a bit of an aggressor.
Yeah.
And it's good to have that. And I think Klein, skill wise, he probably needs to improve his skills a little bit. But very, very effective and aggressive. You come up against Argentina, who are trying to really intimidate you. You throw Klein into that situation, and I've seen him do it with Munster last year, where big physical, in the last 2 seasons, where big physical teams come to Thomond Park and they try and intimidate. And he's the one pulling down the maul, hitting rucks, cleaning guys out.
Where is he in the hierarchy then of second rows?
He's not as skillful as the other ones, but I tell you, he's not a million miles away from, because we don't have a massive list of guys there. There's 4 or 5 guys who are ahead of him probably, but I think he can certainly climb up into that Leinster game last year in Dublin, the semi-final, the clean out on Ross Byrne. He got yellow carded. People spoke about that, and they kind of focused on that after the game. I thought he was fantastic in that game, aside from that incident. He's not a dirty player, he's physical, but I thought he was outstanding the whole way through that game against a really strong Leinster side, and really taking the ball around the fringes, not being afraid to make those carries. So I think he's someone who could certainly come into the reckoning.
That second half Munster pack then is actually pretty close, or getting close enough to a first choice. Well, obviously CJ Sanders got to come back into it, but
Peter
O'Mahony. But you've got Tadhg Byrne in, you've got John Klein in, you've got a bunch of players there who are going to be the backbone of this team when they're playing at full bore, and so you wouldn't be too worried about the physicality of that group.
Not really, and sometimes it's not physicality where you're not strong enough to turn up. It's maybe just not coming out firing, and that's why in all sport, winning away from home is difficult, because the home team have that extra bit of energy. They feel we can't lose here, our crowd will turn on us. So great teams win away from home, and you learn how to have a real attitude, and that's something that's a stronger, probably more settled side, and you bring Stander, O'Mahony, Cloty could come back into the mix as well. So it's Niall Scannell could come back involved as well. So there's a few other guys to come back into the group as well, but I don't think there'll be any issues with them up front. They have a lot of options this year, and Byrne is certainly a great addition to that group.
Cooney signed a new 3-year deal with Ulster at the weekend, and celebrated by another last-minute winner. Yeah, and that's a great statement for them, because it's a positive story, isn't it? We know what happened last year. They've 2 good wins.
2 stuttery wins, if you like. You'd like to be winning a little bit more convincingly.
Yeah, so when you're in a team like this where you're scraping these wins, do you think this is great, we're playing badly and winning, or do you think, ooh, we're not really at it and we're just getting away with it?
You're taking the wins and you're going, Jesus, where we were last year, with a lot of these fixtures. And I think Dan McFarlane, they'll have to certainly work on a certain amount of things. They're quite porous in defence. But John Cooney, the excitement, and you saw the reaction of the players. They're jumping around the place. The crowd are walking out of the King's Pen saying that's 2 wins. We're in a better place, but they've got to build on it. But look, it's so early during the season for all the teams. It's very hard to kind of make assessments and say how good or one or the other.
Yeah. One quick point on that then. Leinster kind of will be disappointed with the fact that they missed a couple of kicks in a game where they had a lot of their front line players out. The kind of mix of players was more towards the first team than second team, and they're just not firing at the minute.
It's a very strong Leinster side now. I was surprised with a lot of the internationals that came back in, Henshaw, Healy. So it was this very, very strong Leinster side. Jordan Larmour. But I think, and Tyke Furlong, of course, I couldn't believe that he would be playing this early in the season, given lines last year, summer tour, all that kind of stuff. But they're obviously...
I think they're all going to give them a 3-month break in the season, secretly. I think there's something going on in the background there, because you were talking, there was a Sexton interview in the Sunday Independent, and he was like, I played 22 games last year. It meant that I felt fit and fresh at the end of the season to go to Australia. So there was never any doubt in anybody's mind.
It's not as if these guys are going to play extra games. They'll probably have an allocated number thereabouts, and it'll be managed throughout the season. But I think I heard Leo Cullen saying after the game he was frustrated with their game management and some of their decision making. But Scarlets are a strong side again at home, very strong side, full of internationals.
Keep them thinking that they can beat you. So it's a game later on in the season when you crush them when it's important.
Yeah,
I think you also need to give valuable mention to that Fergus McFadden try on Saturday night. What an unbelievable finish, and also the try that never was, the Larmour and Lowe one on the left wing, which evolved the forward pass. Can't remember who actually finished it off in the end on that occasion. Over the summer, you kind of forgotten the power of that Leinster back three and just how many exciting moments they're going to give over the course of the season.
We're going to take a quick look at the Pro 14 fixtures coming up this week. We can stick those up for you now. So Connacht are at Edinburgh, that's on the 14th, and then so Leinster have Dragons at home. That's their first home game of the season at the RDS on Saturday afternoon. Did I skip one? I did. Munster Friday evening as well at so that's in Cork against the Ospreys. And then the last one that I'm looking for there are Ulster at the bottom down in South Africa in Nelson Mandela Bay against the Southern Kings. All of those games live on Air Sport this weekend, across the weekend. A quick mention of the Irish and France, the Wild Geese. Good weekend for the Paris lads. For Simon Zebo and Donncha Ryan, not so good for...
Good scored, 57-7 against Eugene. Stade Francais beaten 42-20 against a very, very, very strong Clermont side. Paddy Butler scored for, we could give him a mention, fellow tip man for Poe against Grenoble. And he's been starting week after week. Sometimes we forget to mention Paddy Butler, a former Munster player, back row. He's doing really well, starts every week there. Dave Foley is there as well, and Sean Dougal. Simon Mannix is coaching there, obviously, who was so poor, doing well. Any other Irish we got to mention? No.
Jordan Murphy.
Lee Perpignan beaten again Paddy Jackson, Leon. So Perpignan are really struggling there in the top 14. Leon beat him 22-16 at home. We
were complaining about Leicester being very badly run and sacking their coach after the opening fixture of the season, but then in comes Jordan Murphy and they stick 49 points up on Falcons.
Yeah, they conceded 33. He was delighted, and after the game he was just wasn't taking too much credit for it. I think he just said that he believed that this is what they can do when they click and stuff like that. So sometimes it's just small change here or there, or mentally change the approach, and they can get some positives. So it'll be interesting. But we named the players last week. They've top class players in that back line, and maybe a bit light up front.
And maybe he can get them cooking. Good stuff, Alan. Thanks very much for joining us. Moving to NFL, going to talk to Mike Carlson in a moment. Here's former New York Giant O.C. Umenyiora speaking on our NFL show about what it's like to get a sack. Tell us what it's like when you know you're about to get the quarterback. What is that sensation like?
It's It's really hard to describe. I think it's so difficult to get there. Sometimes, there's 60 plays in a game. They're going to pass the ball nowadays 30, 35 times. And if you get one sack, you had a really good game. So I think you're getting around the edge and you see him. Most of the time, you're not going to get there. You see him releasing the ball. You try to get a little shot in there. But sometimes when you come around, you see him hold the ball for that split second. And inside your head, you're begging. You're like, please, please, please just hold the ball. Hold on to this ball for this one extra second. And then when he does and you get there, it's like scoring a goal. It's such a satisfying feeling.
All right, Mike Carlson, good morning to you. How you doing?
Oh, okay. Better than OC, I guess. I'm not feeling too frustrated.
Are you a little bit bleary-eyed after the opening weekend?
A little bit's the best word for it. That was amazing. Opening day was Thursday, but opening Sunday. Just games that were incredibly close, some surprise results, a shootout that we sort of never expected, a couple of upsets, and of course, from my mind, still a lot of controversy over what is and isn't a tackle now, to add to our ongoing debate about what is or isn't a catch.
Yeah, so just to explain to people about the tackle, basically what's happened is that, not having seen this happen in the preseason, but if somebody is tackling the quarterback and they land on the quarterback in the act of tackling him, that's now a penalty.
Yeah, and we were watching the Jacksonville game, which we were doing on radio in London, and then watching Red Zone on another screen and trying to keep up with everything else that was going on. It seemed like every time you looked, someone was getting a sack and getting a penalty. And Carlos Dunlop, for the Bengals, got one, and you just thought, how can you levitate your body up off the quarterback when you hit him? And it was an absolutely perfect kind of form tackle. You hit him, and as you're going down, you can't separate, from. And we know it. To me, it's like the helmet rule. It's very easy to see when someone is using their helmet to target or their helmet as the lead in their tackle. But you're taught to tackle with your head. You're taught to wrap, and you're taught to drop. So it's very easy to see when somebody tries to apply extra pressure, as if they were, coming off the top rope in a wrestling match with a splash. But it's very hard to tell when somebody actually tackles a quarterback and is lying on top of him that he's trying to gain any extra advantage or inflict any extra harm.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a story because it happened in about 4 separate games that I saw it in. So let's talk about one of the big stories coming from last night. This is Aaron Rodgers' come from behind victory. There was a moment where Khalil Mack, one of the biggest, most expensive transfers in NFL history, has one of those moments that you're not really supposed to have in your debut unless there's some some mediocre Hollywood writer scripting it. He gets an interception, takes it to the house. Chicago's going absolutely mental, thinking, okay, this is the start of a new era. Aaron Rodgers goes out of the game injured, and everybody's like, oh, what's going to happen here? But, it's Aaron Rodgers, and it turns out he is the Messiah.
Yeah, and they were down 20-0 at the half. They were down 23 at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and I hate to use another wrestling metaphor, but what it needed was someone to play the music and then have the announcers go, "That's Aaron Rodgers' music," and have him come walking out onto the field. And it was amazing because I think partly Khalil Mack ran out of gas in the second half, which is what happens when you don't have any preseason to get ready. But partly they also adjusted, and Rodgers, it's a knee injury of some sort. I'd suspect a sprain in his ACL, but he wasn't moving all that much. But he was simply sliding a bit in the pocket. They picked up their protection to give him some time, and then you just watched him hit receiver after receiver in perfect positions. And they weren't doing anything fancy to get them open either. They were just coming down in it, and it was clinical. And of course, there was a dropped interception. The kind of untold story. It was a sitter in the fourth quarter that if it were intercepted, there goes the Packers' rally win and the story. But it didn't happen. And 2 big plays, one to Geronimo Allison, whose name I love, and one to Randall Cobb. And when you hit a receiver in stride, a lot of good things can happen. And that's what happened with Cobb. Over the middle, one deep safety comes up to try to steal the ball. Cobb makes the catch because it's perfectly placed for him, and then there's really nobody between him and the goal line until he gets to about the 10.
It really is a shame that the Packers are in the NFC, because I think what we all want, and I think what we all deserve really at this point, is like a massive championship game this season between Tom Brady and between Aaron Rodgers. The NFC is probably just a little bit too deep for that to happen in the Super Bowl, unfortunately. But what do you reckon? What are the chances of a Brady versus Rodgers Super Bowl?
Well, I think the Packers are not as strong all around roster-wise as some of the other teams in the NFC. And you're absolutely right. It's the much stronger division. I mean, in their division, they've got Minnesota, who's going to be a difficult ask for them because they're so good defensively. The Patriots, I think, have a pretty good shot, even though they're a long way off right now. They didn't look very impressive against Houston, unless you consider what Brady was working with to get that win. But Rodgers can carry a team a long way. It's amazing some of the things that he has done in the playoffs. In particular, I think of the game in Atlanta a couple of years ago. So it's a long shot, I would say. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Rodgers v. Brady would be the best story of the year if it got to the Super Bowl.
The biggest loser yesterday seems, to my mind, to have been Le'Veon Bell, because it turns out that all the stuff about...
Sorry, did you miss Buffalo?
Well, sorry. I mean, I think when they picked Nathan Peterman, they knew exactly what they were doing. I definitely think that they might have just decided, right, we're throwing this season, we want the first pick, and we're just going to tell everybody that from the get-go. But it turns out that the offensive line, when they were saying, hey, hang on a second, we're the guys who are making Le'Veon Bell rich, maybe they have a point. James Conner comes up, steps in, and goes for, was it nearly 200 yards and 2 touchdowns?
Yeah. And as many people pointed out, Le'Veon Bell lost $885,000 by not playing in that game. And James Conner earned $34,000 for playing in that game. So this is the thing that when we were saying this about Saquon Barkley in our game, and Leonard Fournette, who again got dinged up and was out in the second half. Running backs, there is the perception running backs are more or less fungible. The really great ones aren't really replaceable by one person, but you can scheme your way around them for a lot less money than you have to pay them, and they're always an injury risk. And Bell's teammates were basically saying he's getting paid now. He's not happy about it, but he's getting paid. It's time for him to play with the rest of the team, which is exactly what Earl Thomas did up in Seattle. He reported on Wednesday, and he played, I think it was 65 snaps, which was, almost the whole game. He got an interception. It looked like he had never missed a beat, but he was then saying he was very tired. His game fitness wasn't there. But you can't lose star players like that. I think, Khalil Mack getting paid the amount of money he did in Chicago, and they got great play from him for at least that first half, and it'll get better as he gets in more game shape. That's what star players do in this game. It is a team game, but you always have to have somebody who steps above that team. And the reason these guys get big money is that they step above more often than most.
Just a quick word on the Browns, because obviously after Hard Knocks, a lot of people were interested in what was going to happen, but a lot of people also have serious and significant doubts about the coaching staff there. To come from 21-7 down against your greatest rivals, who Big Ben always beats, they don't get credit in America for having a tie. The rest of the world is like, oh, that's not bad, you guys are all like, hey, hang on a second, you may as well have lost.
Yeah, I may have lived here too long, but I've been arguing for years that there's nothing wrong with a tie, and that goes back to a college game in 1966. Notre Dame and Michigan State tied 10-10. They were 1-2 in the polls, both undefeated at Michigan State. It was a brutal game, a great game. Alabama, who were also undefeated and in number 3, didn't move up in the polls, and Bear Bryant, their coach, thought they should because the other two teams had tied. And he said, a tie is like kissing your sister. And from that point on, America has gone completely tie-phobic. And for reasons I don't understand. To me, it shows you often which coach wants to win and which coaches want not to lose. Because when you get in that position toward the end of the game where you could score a touchdown and go for a 2-point conversion and the win, coaches will never do that. Now, of course, that's because we have overtime, and they'd rather take their chances there. But I think a tie was a fair result for that game. Absolutely. And the way the Steelers players were celebrating when they blocked that field goal that would have given Cleveland the win, I think the players thought it was a good result too. Certainly better than taking a loss to the Browns. But the Browns have a lot of talent. If you can avoid uncoaching them, I think that's a division that is more balanced than people think. I don't know if there's a whole lot of room between the four teams in those divisions. In that, Cincinnati played really well. Obviously, Baltimore destroyed Buffalo. So that I think that one could go right down to the wire.
Who's worse at American football, Mike? Who have we got? Nathan Peterman or Josh Allen?
Boy, it's a tough coaching decision there. And A.J. McCarron, who they traded to Oakland, it makes you wonder what John Gruden was thinking about in Oakland, if he's the third of the three. But, Peterman had a historically bad... He lasted 3 quarters, which is a quarter better than he did in his first start, his only other start last year. But it was a historically bad 3 quarters. I think Tony Graziani is the only guy who's performed as badly, and no one remembers Tony Graziani except me. Allen obviously isn't ready. He's probably he definitely has more upside than Peterman, but he's definitely not ready. And Peterman looked good in preseason, which tells you all you need to know about how important preseason is.
Yeah, we're gonna have to make sure to get a Buffalo Bills question in every single Monday. Next week we can pretty much ask who should they take number 1 in the draft next year, because
I want to point out. I'm glad you made that Rodgers Brady thing, because this morning I'm wearing my Tom Brady 12.5 T-shirt just for you guys, but unfortunately the Skype camera doesn't really show it.
What's 12.5?
That's the minimum inflation level for the American footballs. When they had the plate date, and they said Brady wanted the balls below 12.5. So since he wears number 12, we've awarded him number 12.5.
You were doing the Jaguars Giants game, so Fournette goes out injured, and that kind of removes any real attacking threat that the Jags have after that. But Saquon Barkley really bottled up in the first half, and then in the second half has that one run that makes you go, well, actually this year's going to be a pretty exciting year for the Giants.
And that's the thing with these kind of backs. You keep pounding away. Bell's kind of the same way. They're big and fast. Ezekiel Elliott's like that. Fournette's like that. You pound away. The other team is obviously keying on you, so they're making it hard for you to gain. But if one guy misses a tackle or you get one really good block at the line of scrimmage, he can be gone. And he's got the speed when he breaks through the first level to go all the way. And the Jags actually, TJ Yeldon did pretty much what you'd expect from TJ Yeldon. He ran reasonably well. He caught a touchdown pass. And this is what I mean about running backs, being fungible beyond those really great guys, and in some cases being good. The Jags' problem, even, more with the best will in the world, is Blake Bortles. In the second half, they were so afraid of letting him throw downfield that they were almost giving away third down plays because they didn't want him to try to go for the sticks, and they were going short, and that kept the game alive, I think, a bit longer than it would have, and the Giants defense played really well as well, but the Jags defense is as good as advertised last year. They've come back just as strong, and they made life pretty hard for Eli Manning, for Barkley for most of the game, but they did win the Odell Beckham versus Jalen Ramsey matchup. Although it's not always one-on-one, definitely. But when they were there, Beckham was having the better of it.
Yeah, it seemed that they didn't mess them up for the whole game. One quick question from YouTube for you. Greatest game of Fitzmagic's career last night, and also, is it the most embarrassing game for Sean Payton? So the Saints got not quite blown out, but nearly blown out by Tampa Bay Buccaneers with their second choice, or maybe now their new first choice quarterback.
Yeah, this has happened before in both cases. The Saints have been blown out on opening day. I think it was last year. It was the year before. And it was a blowout because they had to kind of come back. So 48-40 flatters the Saints because they were able to come back within a touchdown, but they were always kind to make up that 2 touchdown gap. Fitz has done this before. He did it for the Rams when he came off the bench in a game, and he did it a couple of years ago Oh God, I'm trying to think of who it was against, but he threw for 6 touchdowns in one game. He's a streaky quarterback. And when you watch, if you watched the highlights or saw the game, he's so relaxed. It's like, it's the best way to lead a team like that. And his passing was very good. He got Deshaun Jackson again in stride on deep passes. He's got Mike Evans as a big target. He just looked like he was having a load of fun out there. And I think the Bucks needed that. That was the biggest shock, I think, of the weekend, because I had the Saints as pretty strong favorites there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Mike, great to have you with us again. Thanks a million for joining us.
Oh, great. I'll have to come up with another T-shirt the next time.
Mike Carlson with us this Monday morning after a pretty interesting weekend of NFL right across the board. And I should, of course... you got some more tweets for us, do you?
Yeah, Le'Veon Bell was on Twitter last night. He posted, that one monocle emoji there. You can see it on screen last night, which was kind of, interesting timing given what James Conner had done on the pitch. And then Jordan Culver, I think he's a journalist, said, "Is this shade? I think this is shade." And Le'Veon Bell replied to that, say, "No shade, just never witnessed a tie before." Not quite sure if I buy that. James Conner yesterday, actually, this is the stat from last night. He ran for 192 total yards. Le'Veon Bell didn't run for 192 total yards at any point in last season. That's how good that performance was yesterday.
It was pretty good.
And that's how good the performance was, given every time Big Ben wanted to do something important, he just threw the ball to Antonio Brown. But
yeah. So, but hang on. Do you think that there was like the whole team trying to gang up to screw Le'Veon Bell?
Of course there was. Did you see the celebration after one of the touchdowns?
No.
It was just like pure elation from his teammates. Like usually, I don't want to tar them all with the wrong brush, but I'm going to do it anyway. Whenever you see an NFL celebration, there's a little bit of, there's an art to it on your own. You let the person go and celebrate. Maybe one other teammate goes and dances with you, or you kind of bump off each other and you kind of let them do their thing. You rarely see the huge sort of team mentality that you often see in other sports. Yeah. Whereas when James Conner, in one of those touchdowns last night, it was proper team mentality. It was almost a pylon, very pointed from what I could see. It's also like, what an amazing start to the season. Like we said this at the start of the show, it's like you just could not turn it off last night, particularly at the conclusion to that Browns-Steelers game, which was just insane.
Yeah. The NFL on Off the Ball brought to you with Subway. Be the real MVP watching the game with the Meat Feast platter. And our weekly show will be back this Wednesday afternoon. We'll tweet out details from our social accounts about when that's going to go live. Now, that is very, very true. Wednesday afternoon. Who have you got on this week? Keane and FAI is going to join us this week.
With his takes, the Matty Fitzpatrick takes are going to be not Matty Fitzpatrick. The Fitzmagic takes. I've forgotten his first name. Ryan. Not the golfer, but the Fitzpatrick takes this week are going to be the one thing that I'm looking forward to. Like, is his profile inflated to the point where, from what I can gather, he's not exactly an exceptional talent, but when he does something amazing like he did last night, then suddenly he's kind of inflated to being like one of the best players in the league.
Well, I mean, reasonable. Serviceable, I think, as opposed to one of the best players in the league.
You've got to get carried away. If you're serviceable, you're amazing, as far as I'm concerned.
Quarterback certainly needs enough to make you rich. Okay, so here's John Giles. He was in studio on Saturday talking about the state of Irish football with Nathan. Here he is talking about Roy Keane's role in the Irish camp.
Assistant managers actually are there to help the manager. But Roy Keane seems to be the opposite to that. There's been too many controversies. This was a medical room row, where Roy obviously said something that offended, I don't know what he said, and Walters was the same. Like, Roy Keane is the highest profile assistant manager in the world. I mean, I've asked people, who's assistant manager of the England team? I don't know. Wales, I don't know. Northern Ireland, I don't know. Scotland, I don't know. Where Roy is...
Front and centre.
Front and centre. But most of the rows, this particular row, wasn't about football. I think it was some insult that Arthur...
Maybe about his fitness.
See, with players, in my experience with players, if he's a chancer, you find out he's a chancer. So don't pick him. It's very simple. If you think he's kidding on, then don't pick him.
Yeah.
If you believe that he's not kidding on, then you have to give him sympathy. You know, every player hates to be injured. Now, I had my fair share of injury, luckily enough, not too bad. So, like in Arthur's case, or Walter's case, I think their injuries have been genuine. And they're lads who would love to play. So the last thing they want to hear is somebody, whether it's abuse, I'm not saying abuse, whether it was abuse or not, but it was something that really hurt them. There's no need for it. There's no need for that.
That was on Saturday before the Mail and the Sun today printed the words that Roy Keane is alleged to have said to Harry Arter, and those words were prick and wanker.
No warning? I'm kind of, my ears are kind of hurt there. If you gave me the warning there, I would have kind of...
I gave you the warning earlier on. I should have. I apologise. Listening to some Pixies on the way to gymnastics on Saturday morning, and I didn't get to it in time for... They have a song about talent where the F-bomb gets dropped a lot. My 6-year-old was delighted. She was like, wow, what?
Just on the pommel horse dropping F-bombs?
No, it was in the car on the way.
Okay, right, okay.
It's like, I didn't realise that there was... Anyway. Right, to celebrate the opening of BuzzSport's 250th shop, we want to send you and a mate to a Premier League match of your choice. Not only will you get tickets to the game, but you also get 250 quid spending money for your chance to win. Text time to play and your details to 53106. That'll cost you 30 cents, and the winner will be announced on OTB AM on Wednesday. Okay, so you've probably seen the Serena Williams story that has become the biggest story in sport globally over the last 24, 48 hours or so. She's been fined for her outburst, which cost her a game in the second set in the final of the US Open. She has been fined €15,000. This is an interesting story, right? So Serena post in the press conference, asked what she would do differently in hindsight, said, I can't sit here and say I wouldn't say he's a thief because I thought he took a game from me, but I've seen other men call other umpires several things. I think that, like, everybody's got a hot take in this where she's 100% right or she's 100% wrong. And there's a possibility that there's enough bullshit on all sides here for everybody to have been a little bit wrong. And also for us to kind of think, well, what is it that drives somebody to be so suspicious of the rules at that point? Like, why does Serena feel like she's being targeted in a way that she thinks is unfair?
Yeah, well, like, that's very true. There hasn't been a lot of nuance brought to this, when in actual fact, this is probably the one argument where there's a lot of nuance here. Because you say there, what would drive somebody to behave in certain ways? Well, it is railing against, a misogynistic society to a certain extent, certainly from Serena's background, a racist society, which kind of allows you to rail against society in a way that no other person has seen, no other person has the capabilities of doing, because you've been wronged so many times in your life. So all that part of it is true, but also the whole idea of accusing the umpire on an individual basis of misogyny or racism or targeting of Serena Williams is probably a little unjustified as well, is it not? Like, I think that this has been quite a divisive issue, and it seems that it's been divisive on the issue of wider societal things, but maybe this is just kind of saying to us as a society how divisive Serena Williams is as a person. I think that is one of the key points that actually hasn't been spoken about that much, is that Serena Williams is a person that has divided opinion hugely, and like, you can go down through a number of examples, but a couple of the main examples are, say, the panic room incident, or say the story that was broken by Deadspin earlier on this summer about getting on the phone to Travis Tygart and not giving a sample when a drug tester comes to her door. So that sort of stuff has created a divisive opinion around her. I'm not necessarily sure if that's down to the societal issues that she talks about. Now, all the stuff she talks about may well exist, and like tennis, you look at it as quite an elitist sport, but ultimately, was she deducted a point for those reasons, or was she deducted a point because she essentially badgered the umpire to the point where he got so pissed off with her that he just had to deduct her a game after the third incident, after the third warning, the third violation, and that's why he did it? I think that's more to the point. But as you say, like, there is a little bit from both columns here as to what's actually correct.
Yeah, I think that these are the type of stories that, like, really you end up reading good pieces about in 5 months' time when the heat has come out of the arguments. Because you can certainly, like, Sue Barker come out and backed her. I've been watching tennis a long time. I've never, ever once in my life seen Sue Barker come out with an opinion about anything, one way or another. But she comes out and goes, I've seen loads of misogyny in tennis.
Yeah, it depends what she's backing her against. Like, I didn't actually see the Sue Barker. She tweeted about it, was it?
I read it in the paper this morning, so.
So, But like, was she backing Serena against the officiating, or was she backing Serena against a wider problem in tennis? Because you kind of tend to agree with Sue Barker on the latter, maybe, but when it comes to the actual incident of Saturday night, well, it's kind of hard to defend, isn't it? Regardless of all the other examples you can use as to why there's a double standard.
So I don't know if it's hard to defend or not. Like, I don't know if she doesn't see your man doing whatever the signal is that he says is coaching, but that is just the same coaching that everybody else is doing, then she feels like she is being cheated against, and so therefore the reaction seems like it's out of kilter with the charge. But ultimately, like, I don't know. I'd say that if you come from a viewpoint where you've been racially abused throughout your career, like you go back to Indian Wells, she didn't go to Indian Wells for a decade because she was abused as a young player there simply because she was good, like by the crowd. If you have come from that to be the biggest and most important tennis player ever, then maybe you've got a slightly different outlook on things.
Of course you do.
Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a line, but at the same time, like, if you feel like something similar, if this is all part of the same narrative to you, then, well, you actually do what you think is right in those circumstances. And, like, you can think they're wrong, you can think that, we can think and have our value system from our position of privilege and go, well, you know, the genteel society says you can't accuse that person of doing that thing. But if ultimately you think that is part of the same process of conduct and treatment, then how do you differentiate that? And what's an appropriate? So say she feels like there is a racist and misogynistic element to what's happening.
Yeah.
Then there's nothing that's inappropriate in your response to that. You're absolutely entitled to do whatever it is you feel you have to do to raise that issue. So that's where this all comes to. You can disagree with that, fair enough, but you're doing that from a position of privilege.
Completely, yeah. I think there's truth in that. Like, just on the slew of Twitter threads that have been put out there around the double standards, when they kind of like show videos of Novak Djokovic or Roger Federer or whoever it may be, men and women tennis players, like giving out stink to umpires in a much more vitriolic way, using far worse language than calling somebody a thief. Like, just to get pedantic for a moment, this was a third violation offence. That's why she was deducted a game. It wasn't to do with the actual verbals she was using towards Carlos Ramos. It was to do with the third violation. It was to do with the coaching. It was to do with the racket. It was to do with the verbal use of words that Carlos Ramos found inappropriate. To be honest with you, he should have just basically sat there and said, right, okay, I'm just going to sit through this and everything's going to be a hell of a lot better for all of us if I don't do anything about this. He completely flared up the situation. He might have been right to do so, but ultimately that's what he did. If you're a tennis umpire within those confines, if you're looking at it from those perspectives, if you talk about putting on glasses of a certain lens, well, if you're a tennis person and you're sitting there as an umpire, is Serena Williams not viewed as a hugely important figure that you're not going to screw over?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they just told her what clothes she can wear, you know?
Well, that's also a fair point.
Because she's a woman. Like, that's bullshit. Do you know what I mean?
No, it is, completely.
And also, like, apparently all the coaches are doing this all the time. So there is that other side of it. It's like, well, you're literally just applying these rules to me. Anyway, like, I'm not defending the behaviour, but I totally understand it. There's a difference there. One last photo I want to show you of this. It's Breach Corkery's son Tig in the O'Duffy Cup as Cork beat Kilkenny by a single point in the All-Ireland Camogie final. That's the best angle of that photograph that I've seen. The most unhappy baby in the world. What did you say, Tommy? James Crombie in info. Good man yourself, James. It's a great picture. So congratulations.
Absolutely great. Like, sports photo of the year right there. Keane Lynch and his mother up there as well.
Yeah. We could do a GAA season sports photos of the year competition, pitting all our buddies against each other. Probably a bad way to do it, but to celebrate all their great work. Owen, good stuff.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. We'll have you again tomorrow if that's all right.
That's okay, yeah. You're going to stay up and watch the NFL tonight? Are you going to be TV 2 days in a row?
No, absolutely not. No, had enough. Definitely not. Right, we'll see you tomorrow, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. The lads will be back on the radio on News Talk tonight from 7. Good luck.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.